Welcome back, everyone. Today I have another film analysis video for you guys. I'm going to be taking on 1959's Sleeping Beauty. I thought this was a perfect follow-up to my first film analysis video that I did about a week ago. I took on The Lion King, which is a story about a young boy who becomes a man. And today I'm going to be taking on Sleeping Beauty, which is a story about a young girl who becomes a woman. So it's a perfect follow-up. And I'm super excited to talk about this film today. It's a film that I grew up watching many, many times. It's one of the most beautifully animated films I've ever seen. And for only being 70 minutes, there's a lot in this film. There's a lot of similarities between The Lion King as well that I'll get to. My goal for this video is to dive into the deeper meaning of Sleeping Beauty, to kind of pull out the archetypes and the symbolism, and to give you guys a deeper connection with this film, because it is a very, very deep film. So with that all out of the way, let's dive into Sleeping Beauty. So let's start with the opening scene. The opening scene in Sleeping Beauty actually mirrors the opening scene in The Lion King quite a bit. They both start with kind of a baptism scene. So we start with our hero, or in this case our heroine, being presented to the world. So the scene actually opens with us flying into a book. Now, you'll see this happen in a lot of Disney movies if you pay attention. Enchanted, The Page Master, and a couple other films that I can't name off the top of my head actually start with us going into a book. So we start by going into the book and we get some narration that goes kind of like this. And we get a couple key pieces of information that you guys are going to want to remember. So the narrator says, "In a faraway land, long ago, lived a king and his fair queen. Many years had they longed for a child, and finally their wish was granted. A daughter was born, and they called her Aurora. Yes, they named her after the dawn because she filled their lives with sunshine. Then a great holiday was proclaimed throughout the kingdom, so that all of high and low estate might come and pay homage to the infant princess." And then we get all these beautiful, beautiful shots of like carriages and knights and different flags being waved, and everybody's kind of coming towards the kingdom and centering around the princess who's being presented to the world, much like how in The Lion King we get all the animals kind of congregating around Pride Rock, and then Rafiki kind of shows Simba to the world. Now, you might be asking, like, why would you want to start here? Why would you want to start with the presentation of the child to the world? Well, that's the earliest possible beginning you can start a hero story, is with the birth of the hero. If you go any farther back than that, then you're kind of getting into the story of the king or the story of the queen, and then it becomes a different story. So the earliest possible place you can start a story is with the presentation of the child to the world, which is a baptism. That's what a baptism is. You're presenting the child to the community so that the community can go, okay, that's the baby, that's the new one that we're supposed to look after, and they can kind of identify it in that way. That's really the purpose of a baptism, is to show the community the child, so that the community can come around the parents and help raise the child collectively. That's how you want to raise a child. You want to have, the grandparents and the aunts and the uncles and the elders of the community kind of looking after the child, so that it takes a little bit of load off of the parents. And then, the parents will do that for some other kid someday. And that's kind of how a community should work. I think a baptism is a very, very important part of a child's life. So we start with a baptism, and then as we get all these beautiful shots of everybody kind of congregating to the castle. They're all singing this song, "Hail to the Princess Aurora, all adore her. Health to the princess, wealth to the princess, long live the Princess Aurora." So they're all wishing her well, right? That's what you want to do as a community when a baby's born. You want to wish it well. So they're all singing in unison. And then we get these shots of Prince Philip, who is a young boy at the time. So he's quite a little bit older than Aurora, but he's giving her a gift, and it's kind of hinted at that, this is supposed to be his future wife, and he's kind of giving the baby a little bit of a look of disgust, like, "I'm supposed to marry you." And of course, that's what you should think as a young boy if you're being betrothed to a baby. But later on in the film, they'll obviously fall in love. And then we get the three good fairies who beam down from the sky. That's the thing that happens next. So it's a beam of light coming from the heavens. So this is the spiritual or the transcendent coming down to earth, and that's represented in the three fairies. So each of them has to give Princess Aurora one gift and no more. That's what Flora says. So Flora, she is the red fairy godmother, the red fairy. The green fairy is Fauna, and then the blue fairy is Merryweather. So those are the three fairies, and I'll talk a little bit about their archetypal significance in a second here. But they all give her a gift. So Flora starts by giving Aurora the gift of beauty. And we get these kind of cool, psychedelic, trippy shots, and then we see this beautiful shot of kind of the divine feminine, right? This is the divine feminine. This is Sleeping Beauty, and kind of touching on, or Aurora, I should say, but this is the beauty part of it, right? So she's gifted with the gift of beauty, and Fauna gives her the gift of song. So we see kind of a similar sequence play out, and then we see this shot with her with a songbird, so she's given the gift of song. And then Merryweather's about to give her gift when Maleficent arrives. And then, obviously, that shakes up the party quite a bit. So Maleficent, once she arrives, she notes that everyone is here, but she didn't get an invitation. And then Merryweather says, "You weren't wanted," and she kind of rolls up her sleeves like she's going to fight Maleficent. And we'll see this throughout the film, that Merryweather has quite a feisty personality. It's quite funny. And then Maleficent kind of acts like she's taken back from this, and she's offended, and she's like, "Oh, you guys don't want me here. I guess I'll leave." But before she leaves, she has to give Aurora her gift. And she says, "The princess shall indeed grow in grace and beauty, beloved by all who know her. But before the sun sets on her 16th birthday, she shall prick her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel and die." So that's quite a grim prophecy, or a grim gift that she's giving to Aurora here. And then the king, obviously, he's aggravated by this, and he orders all of his guards to seize Maleficent. But Maleficent, she's obviously got some powers, so she zaps away, and she's gone before the guards can even arrest her. So obviously this kind of touches on the moral of this story, which is the consequences of an Oedipal relationship. So an Oedipal relationship is when a mother or a father, or both, in this case both, devour their child by overprotecting them, right? They consume them by overprotecting them, and kind of being like a helicopter parent. And they try to protect Aurora too much from the evil of the world. So the first mistake is they don't invite evil to the party, right? They don't invite the shadow. They don't invite Maleficent to the party. So that's their first mistake. They kind of shut it out. They don't want their child to know anything about evil. And you can't exactly blame them, because it says in the narration that these two are quite old, right? The king and queen are quite old, and they've been waiting a long time for a child. And they finally got one, right? They got one child, so they're very protective over it. And not only that, it's a daughter. So you're going to be much, much more protective over a daughter than you are of a son, because a daughter is much more vulnerable, especially physically in the world. So, and then obviously the second mistake is the king asking, can the curse be undone? Which, of course, it can't. You know, evil is always going to find you in the world. You can't undo that curse. But the transcendent, the spiritual, God, you know, that's what the fairies represent, God. They can help you. They can help you in a spiritual way. And we'll see that they can't help you in a practical way later in the film, but they can help you in a spiritual way. So, of course, Merryweather helps to alleviate some of this stress from the king by giving a little spin. And this is kind of a trickster play here. She gives a spin on Maleficent's curse so that it's not exactly what Maleficent said. She says, "Sweet princess, if through this wicked witch's trick a spindle your finger should prick, a ray of hope there still may be in the gift I give to thee. Not in death, but just in sleep, the faithful prophecy shall keep, and from this slumber you shall wake, when true love's kiss the spell shall break." So she adds a caveat kind of to Maleficent's curse, that she can be awakened if she finds true love, if she, you know, completes her heroine journey, which we'll get to later. But then the king makes, you know, of course, his third mistake, and he decrees that all the spindles in all the kingdom should be burnt. And of course, it's done, right? They burn all the spindles in the kingdom, kind of, again, hearkening back to that Oedipal relationship where the king just wants all of the evil banished from the kingdom. He doesn't want any evil to touch his daughter, and this is going to be the downfall of Aurora later in the film. So that kind of wraps up the first scene, but I'm going to go over kind of the characters and their basic archetypes here, because we're introduced to pretty much all of the characters in this first scene, with the exception of King Hubert, which I'll get to in a little bit, but let's go over the characters quickly. So, obviously, we're introduced to Aurora, who is our heroine, right? She's the anima. She's also our protagonist. She's the one who we're following. The film's titled Sleeping Beauty, right? This is a story that's following Aurora primarily, but we also get introduced to Prince Philip right away. And he is our hero. He's the animus. He's the opposite to Aurora. And I'll go over who played all of these characters because even though you guys probably don't know a lot of these actors, I thought they did amazing jobs voice acting. So I do want to shout them out. So Aurora / Briar Rose, she's called Briar Rose later in the story. She's played by Mary Costa. Prince Philip is played by Bill Shirley. And then we're also introduced to King Stefan, who is the good king. I wouldn't quite call him the wise king in this scenario because, he is kind of the downfall of Aurora in his overprotection of her. And he's played by Taylor Holmes. Then there's Queen Leia, who's played by Verna Felton. She's obviously the good queen. And Verna Felton also plays Flora, who's one of the fairies. Fauna is played by Barbara Jo Allen, and Merryweather is played by Barbara Luddy. And the three fairies, like I said before, they kind of represent the wise sage or the spiritual guide, kind of a similar role that Rafiki fills, right, in The Lion King. They're also the great mothers because for 16 years of Aurora's life, they're the ones who are raising her. They're the ones who kind of teach her everything that she knows up until that point. And then we're also introduced to Maleficent, of course, who's played by Eleanor Audley, who does a terrific job voice acting Maleficent. And she is the shadow, right? She's the villain. She's chaos personified. She's the unconscious. She's not the divine feminine. She's the evil feminine in this case. And one of the best evil feminine characters I think I've ever seen in film as well. She's absolutely terrific archetype. So those are kind of the characters and their archetypes. And with that all out of the way, let's get into the second scene. Next up, we have the fairies' plan. Now, the three fairies start to talk about how they're going to stop Maleficent. And they start by kind of thinking, well, maybe we can reason with her. That's what Fauna says, right? She's kind of the naive one in some ways. And Merryweather says, I want to turn her into a fat old pop toad, which, goes back to what I was saying. Merryweather's kind of the feisty one. She wants to just fight Maleficent straight up. And then Fauna explains, however, that their magic can only be used to bring joy and happiness. So these fairies are good fairies, and they're only good fairies, which has its benefits and it has its downfalls. So obviously, as a fully actualized human being, obviously we're not fairies, we're not divine, eternal beings, we're human. As a human, you don't want to be all good. You want to, balance the yin and yang, be able to be a monster, be able to be dangerous, but, keep that under control and go about the world with good intentions. That's kind of like balancing that dichotomy. And you'll see that in many, many heroes' journeys. They have to face the evil, not just in the world, but within themselves, right? Another great way of putting this is that you should buy a sword, you should sharpen it, but you should always keep it sheathed. I think it was Sun Tzu who said that, and it's a brilliant quote because you should be able to be capable of, being dangerous, but you should keep that under wraps. That's what a truly actualized human being is. But in this case, we have fairies who represent, obviously, the divine, the eternal, the spiritual, and they are just good. So they're a little bit limited in what they can do. They can't, attack Maleficent. They can't do anything of any malice. They can only do things that, like they said, only bring joy and happiness. So then Flora comes up with a plan, and she says, she can't say it out loud because even walls have ears, which is, a great little line. That kind of reminds me of probably what it would be like to live in the Soviet Union. I think it was 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 people living in the Soviet Union during Stalin's reign were informants. So that means, one person in every single household was an informant. So, there certainly are horrible situations in reality where it is kind of like the ears have walls because you don't even know who to trust even in your own household. Anyways, so they shrink down and they go into this little cabinet, and Flora suggests that maybe they could turn her into a flower, which at first doesn't seem like the worst idea, hiding her in plain sight, but that's not going to work because as Merryweather says, until Maleficent sends a frost, and plus she would expect that. So they kind of know that Maleficent would kind of expect them to hide her in plain sight, just turn her into a flower, turn her into something sweet, and then Maleficent will just kill everything. Now this kind of harkens back to the biblical story of the birth of Jesus, right? So when Jesus is born and you have Mary and Joseph, they want to, stay in Bethlehem and hide out, and obviously raise the child. But an angel comes to them and says, no, you can't stay here. You can't hide in plain sight. You have to go into Egypt because, Herod or whoever it was sent soldiers to kill all the babies, right? They're going to wipe out everything. That's, sending a frost to wipe out all the flowers. It's the same exact thing. So they have to take Aurora into the desert, into Egypt. They have to take her away to a cabin in the woods, right? Somewhere far, far away. And they can't use magic, right? Flora says that they can't use magic because that will alert Maleficent to their location. So they have to make a sacrifice. They have to zap off their wings and put away their wands and raise Aurora like I think it was Merryweather says, like a mortal. So they have to make a sacrifice themselves in order to raise Aurora in a safe environment. They also say that Maleficent doesn't know anything about love or kindness. Now, this will pop up later in the film, so keep that in mind, and that kind of concludes the second scene. So let's move on to the third. So in the third scene, we have the king and queen watching the fairies take away Aurora. So obviously they're upset by this. They're missing 16 years of their child's life. That's a big sacrifice for the king and queen to make as well. But, they are so overprotective of their child that they're willing to do anything to keep her safe. So they send her with the fairies and they take her away. Time passes. We kind of get like a jump in time here. And Aurora's 16th birthday is approaching. Now, this scene is really, really cool, too. Maleficent is upset, and she asks her minions if they've searched everywhere. And they say that they searched all the cradles in the land. And Maleficent, she says, all these years they've been looking for a baby. And she starts to laugh this kind of like maniacal, insane laugh. And then her minions, because they're dumb, right, they join in thinking that it's funny. And then she yells at them and she says, fools, idiots, imbeciles, and zaps them all away. Now, this is, a parallel to exactly what happened in The Lion King with the Be Prepared scene. That whole musical sequence, Scar is saying like over and over again how stupid and dumb and how all these hyenas are just idiots and they're so below him. And that's what a cruel, evil ruler is like, right? They push everybody down so that they can get higher, so they can make that gap wider and wider, and they just push everybody below them and call them idiots. And that's exactly what Maleficent does here. But, in her defense, the minions are idiots because they were looking in a cradle for 16 years. Obviously, Aurora would have been out of the cradle by that time, so it's just a funny little scene here. And then she tells her crow that he is her last hope and that he has to go and look for Aurora, a girl of 16 with hair sunshine gold and lips red of the rose. So that kind of harkens back to Briar Rose, right? She's the rose, Aurora's the rose, Sleeping Beauty, all of that. And the crow, the interesting thing about the crow here is it's kind of the opposite of Zazu. So if you remember in the Lion King analysis, the hand to the king, the hand to Mufasa is Zazu, and it's a bird, right? So that bird flies up above everybody else, and it could see everything, and then it brings that down to Mufasa, and that's what's like having a good, associate in a company, right? Somebody who's like your right-hand man, he's gonna be that guy for you. And in this case, we get the reverse, right? It's for Maleficent. It's the evil version. It's the crow. Crows and ravens are often seen as birds of death, so the symbolism's perfect there. And the crow flies over the land and tries to find Aurora, and that's, we'll see where that goes, but let's get into the next scene. So in our next scene, we cut to the cottage, and the fairies have so far successfully raised Aurora and have called her Briar Rose. Now, an interesting thing about Briar Rose is obviously you have the rose, that's Aurora, and then the briar, the thorns, that's the fairies trying to protect her. And that will also be the prince later on in the film, but it's cool how you have, like, the briar protecting the rose. The symbolism will pop up later, I'll touch on it later, but there will be these thorns that pop up around the kingdom. So there's thorns literally guarding the rose, which is Aurora, and the prince has to cut through the thorns to get to her. It's perfect. But anyways, they've called her Briar Rose, and and the fairies are planning a birthday surprise for her. They're going to bake her a cake, and they're going to make her a dress because it's her 16th birthday. And she's singing, Briar Rose is singing. She comes downstairs, and the fairies are like, oh no, she's going to ruin the surprise. So they send her out to go pick berries while they discuss the surprise for her. So Merryweather says, I'll get the wands. And Flora says, no, we're not taking any chances, which is fair, right? She's just about to turn 16. Why would you mess this up now? It's a good point. But Merryweather says that Flora has never sewn before and Fauna has never cooked. So this is going to go horribly, which it does. Flora and Fauna get to work on the dress, but they clearly have no idea what they're doing. Fauna at one point takes 3 different sized cups to pour flour in, and Flora just starts cutting random holes in the dress, and it's quite funny. And then there's this cute little line here where Merryweather says, it looks awful, referring to the dress, and Flora says, that's because it's on you, dear. I always think that that's a really funny line. And then there's another line, too, where Flora says, it's got to have a hole in the bottom, and Fauna says, that's for the feet to go through. So they're just kind of cutting random holes into this fabric, trying to make a dress, and it's really funny. But there is symbolism to this that I think is quite interesting. So the spiritual guide, the sage, right, the wise sage, God, if you want to think of it as God or gods, depending on what you believe in, that kind of spiritual enlightenment and guidance can only get you so far. So if you get into touch with your spiritual side and you talk to God, that can give you a lot of guidance. It can help you. It can help heal you internally. But it can't do things practically for you, right? It fails at that. If you ask God to make you a successful business company, he's not just going to like drop it on your lap. You have to do it yourself. And that's what we're seeing here is the fairies are struggling with that because Aurora's come of age and she doesn't know how to do any of these things. She's been raised by fairies out in the woods, right? She has the spiritual guidance, but she doesn't have any of the practical skills yet. So this is just brilliant, right? It's brilliant. It reflects how God and your parents even, they can't do practical things for you come you becoming an adult. It's up to you now. They can give you all the advice, all the spiritual advice, all the guidance they can possibly muster, but at the end of the day, it's up to you. So that is beautifully represented here in the 4th scene, and let's move on to the 5th scene. So next we get the forest scene. This is one of the 3 big scenes in the movie. Obviously the first scene, the baptism, being one of them, the forest scene being the other one, and the last scene, kind of the end battle, being the other big scene in the movie. So there's a lot that happens in this one. I picked out quite a few stills for you guys, as I did for the whole film, but I hope there's lots of good visuals for you guys. There's so much brilliant animation in this film, and I think it's most exemplified in this scene. It's absolutely stunning what the animators did. So yeah, let's get into this scene. So Aurora starts by entering the forest, and she starts to sing, right? She's using that gift of song that she has. Now, I don't know exactly why she has the gift of song per se. I know that music and art in general is more of a feminine quality, and science and mathematics are a little bit more of a masculine quality. So there is a little bit of that, and obviously out of the art forms that there are, movies, books, and music is probably the most feminine. There's also this for me personally, if a girl is really, really beautiful and then can also sing, for me, that's like almost the full package. Like, what more can you possibly ask? As far as like gifts go, like divine, God-given gifts. Things that you learn in life aside, cooking and cleaning, and not to say that women just cook and clean, but all the other skills you can learn as a woman that come later on in life, those are kind of acquired gifts or acquired skills, whereas, the gift of song, you're either born with it or you're not. I'm certainly not, and Aurora is, so she starts singing, and all the birds come around her, right? The birds start singing with her. She has such a gift of song that she attracts all the animals, and they all start singing with her. And this symbolizes a couple different things. It symbolizes her deep connection with the natural world, for one, which I don't want to say this is like a black and white statement, but women typically have a deeper connection with the natural world, whereas men have a deeper connection with the material world. It's just a basic stat that women are typically more interested in people, in nature, and men are more typically interested in things. Obviously, that's not black and white. People are all across the spectrum on that, but I myself am way more interested in people than I am things. I couldn't care less about cars, but I'll read books all day. So obviously it's not black and white, but it also reflects her childlike aspect and her purity, right? She's the innocent right now. We'll see that in a film that I'll cover a little bit later. Probably the next film I'll cover actually is Pinocchio, and that's the same kind of thing, right? It's an innocent, naive, childlike character that doesn't really know anything about the world, and that's exemplified here through Aurora, or Briar Rose in this case, kind of singing, frolicking through the forest. But Prince Philip hears this as he rides by on his horse, and he tries to find her, but he ends up falling in a pond trying to find her, which is quite funny. But one thing that I'll say about the prince riding a horse is this is something that you'll see a lot in the hero's journey. You'll see, the hero, right, the male hero riding a horse, because this shows the male's ability to master nature, to master beast, right? He has mastery over the beast, either the internal beast or the external beast. In this case, I think it represents both, right? Prince Philip is a pretty good character, right? He's pretty fully actualized. He still has to go and fight his dragon towards the end, but he has that mastery over beast. He has like perfect control over his horse, and that's cool to see. You'll notice that pop up in later films that I cover too. And then Aurora kind of plays out this fantasy with her animal friends. Seems to be her only friends at this point. And she tells them that she's met a man, and they're all curious, right? They all kind of lean in like, "Ooh, who did you meet? Who?" Right? The owl says, "Who is it?" And then she goes on to say that it's somebody who she met in her dreams, and they're kind of like let down by that. They're like, "Oh, this girl's just, daydreaming the whole time," which is what you would be doing if you were raised in the woods by 3 women and have never met a man in your life, right? This is going to play a pivotal role in what happens to Sleeping Beauty, is the fact that she's never met a man yet, right? She's 16 and she's never had any interactions with men aside from, being a very, very young baby and seeing obviously the prince and the king. But yeah, that's a key bit of information to keep track of. And then a squirrel spots the prince and gets all the animals to follow. They all kind of go over towards the prince and they steal his clothes. And then the prince gives chase. He wants his clothes back, so he's chasing his clothes, and all the animals come back to Briar Rose, and the owls kind of got the cape over them, and the rabbits are in the boots, and the birds are holding the hat. And Briar Rose starts to dance with them, right? She's in her fantasy land. She's dancing with her animals. And then the prince finally catches up, sees the princess, obviously love at first sight. He's just infatuated with her, so he tries to butt in, and it's really funny because he butts in from behind, and this is just wild. Like, if you think about it, you have this girl who's been raised by 3 women in the forest her entire life. She's out there just singing, thinking that she's alone, and then some man comes from behind and just starts dancing with her. If this ever happens to you in real life, if you're just like dancing in a forest alone and some man tries to dance with you from behind, run. Run as fast as you can. This is a terrifying scene to think about in reality, but it is perfect in how the symbolism is, right? The prince just he comes in and she doesn't really even notice him at first, and then she's kind of taken back, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't mean to frighten you." She's like, No, I'm not frightened," because she's, obviously falling in love right away as well. But they play this cat and mouse game where they're kind of like chasing each other around trees, and it's perfect, right? Like, if you've ever fallen in love before, you know exactly what this is. The cat and mouse, you push things a little too far, and then you got to pull back, and it's cute, right? That's how you kind of intertwine together. And then they start dancing, right? They form that unity. They kind of become one almost, right? They kind of get torn away at the end here, but they start dancing, and they come back actually to the lookout where Briar Rose was looking over just a couple minutes ago. She was kind of looking out over the kingdom, thinking about falling in love with a prince, and then she goes back and she finds the prince, and then they kind of dance, and then they're back looking out over the kingdom. So the scene kind of does a full circle there, which is awesome. That's perfect. And then the prince asks, "Who are you? What's your name?" And obviously, because she's afraid of strangers, she was raised to be afraid of any strangers. She hasn't even met anybody in her life yet. She runs away. She runs away from this, and they don't fully become one yet, unfortunately. And she tells the prince that she can't say, and he asks, "Will I ever see you again?" And she says, this is really, really cool. Like, the writing in this is brilliant. She says, "Never, So absolutely no, like not never gonna happen, right? She says never. But then she says, but maybe someday, right after. So it's never, but maybe someday. So the absolute goes to like opening the door a bit. And then he says tomorrow, right? That's kind of the, every guy knows what that is, kind of pushing your luck, being like, yeah, can I see you tomorrow? Like, that's a little bit immediate. But then she says, no, tonight. So she goes a step further, and that's, again, kind of playing back to the cat and mouse thing. So she says, tonight at the cottage. So the prince obviously is elated by that, and he wants to go meet her tonight. So that kind of concludes scene 5. I'm going to go over the song that they sing real quick. If this song was, like, a little bit better, like if it was like Can You Feel the Love Tonight good, if you matched like a song of that quality with the animation that's in this scene, this would be like the best love scene of all time, because the animation in this is some of the best animation I've ever seen in my life. Like it's a beautifully shot scene. Not that the song's bad, it's just that there's kind of, there's levels to love songs, and it's hard to beat Can You Feel the Love Tonight. But here's the song and the lyrics. It goes, I wonder why each little bird has someone to sing to, sweet little things to, a gay little love melody. I wonder if my heart keeps singing, will my song go on winging to somebody who will find me and bring back a love song to me. And of course, that's exactly what happens in this scene. So she's playing out this fantasy, and then it happens. It's brought to her. And one other thing I want to point out, which is brilliant, is the fact that the squirrel and the animals bring these two together, right? Nature brings them together. Reality pulls these two together. That's what happens. If you've ever fallen in love, if you have a wife or a husband, and you think back to when you guys first met, you probably think on it like, man, it's kind of weird how we met. Like, it seems like the forces of nature, or the forces of reality, or God himself, if you believe in God, kind of pulled you guys together. And that's exactly what plays out here, right? The animals bring them together. Nature pulls man and woman together. So that's just brilliant stuff. And yeah, let's get into the 6th scene now. So next we cut back to the cottage, and the dress and cake look horrible. Merryweather insists on fetching the wands at this point, because they obviously need the magic to make the dress and to bake the cake and to clean up the horrible mess that has come of their dismal efforts here. You can see, like, in this shot, the dress doesn't even look like a dress, and in this shot the cake is like leaning over, it's about to fall over onto Fauna. And yeah, this is just obviously not going well, hearkening back to what I said before. The spiritual can't do the practical, right? So they grab the wands and they clean everything up and they bake the cake and they make the dress, but they've used magic, so this alerts the crow, right? And it's not even so much that they were using the magic, but Flora and Merryweather kind of get into this battle of changing the dress from pink to blue, and I'll get into the symbolism of that in a second here, but they kind of have this battle, and then the magic's kind of shooting out of the chimney, and then the crow sees it, and then he sees Aurora just as she's coming home, so evil's been alerted to their presence because they used the magic. It's exactly what they thought was going to happen, and they couldn't wait long enough, right? They couldn't wait to her 16th birthday. They wanted to give her a surprise, and they've kind of ruined it. So the symbolism in this is quite interesting. So tapping into the unconscious, or tapping into the spiritual realm, can bring the shadow, can bring evil, can bring Maleficent upon you, right? So you need to be aware of unearned wisdom. That's a Carl Jung quote, and I think it goes perfectly here, because when you tap into that spiritual side of yourself, when you tap into, talking to God, or maybe you had a near-death experience, or something like that, where like you're tapped into that other side, that can oftentimes bring things onto you that are, evil and maleficent, and that's something to really keep in your mind, because the more you pull the poles apart, obviously, like, the more you tap into the spiritual, this is what I find, at least in my experience, the more good the more good you can see in good, and the more bad you can see in bad. So the poles get like pulled apart. You can see more evil and you can see more good, if that makes any sense. I hope that makes sense, but this is kind of the symbolism that I see here, is they start using the magic. So this is symbolizing Aurora kind of tapping into that spiritual side, and that's what brings Maleficent upon her. So Merryweather and Flora battling over which dress color it should be kind of symbolizes the dual the dual nature of Aurora right now. It symbolizes the feminine and the masculine inside her, and how they're kind of in conflict right now, right? She just met this prince and she's frantic about him, right? She thinks she's in love and she's just all over the place. And that kind of is symbolized in the dress turning colors. And the animus and the anima not being fully integrated yet. And we'll see at the very end of the film how the changing of the dress is representing that comes back. But the magic, yeah, like I said, it gets out of control. The crow sees Briar Rose. Briar Rose comes back. She tells the fairies about the prince who she met. Obviously, not knowing that it's the prince, she thinks that the prince and this guy who she met in the forest are two separate people. Fauna says, "Oh, she's in love," kind of commenting on how frantic she is. And then the fairies kind of explain to her that she can't be in love with this random guy in the forest because she's already betrothed to Prince Philip, and that she's a princess, right? They tell her, like, you're a princess, which is like the greatest news in the world, that you're, the heir to like the greatest fortune in the land, right? You think you'd be pretty pumped about that, but she's absolutely distraught. She basically has PTSD from meeting a guy who she only met for like less than 5 minutes, and that's not good, that's horrible. And it's because she was tucked away in a forest her whole life, right? She's never seen a man. So the first man she runs into just absolutely destroys her, right? So that's just perfect, right? That's exactly what happens when you have that sort of Oedipal relationship with your children and you hide them away from the world too long, and you never let them date a man or see a man, and they can never go outside, and then eventually they go outside and they're just absolutely ruined by the first man that they see. So moving on to the 7th scene here. So next we cut to the kings. We cut to King Stefan and King Hubert. And King Stefan notes that there's still no sign of Aurora, and King Hubert, who's just absolutely stuffing his face at this time, he tries to comfort Stefan, and they start drinking this 16-year-old wine. So, 16-year-old wine. Aurora's about to turn 16. And they toast to the future. And Hubert says that he's already built a castle for Aurora and Philip. And King Stefan says that it's too soon. And they start arguing. And then the arguing gets worse and worse and worse, and it ramps up, and eventually they actually draw swords on each other and start like dueling. And then they start laughing and they laugh things off. And I think that that's perfect. It kind of shows like how a father and a father-in-law kind of start their relationship with each other, right? It's kind of contentious at first. It's like, you're marrying my daughter, you're marrying my son, but eventually they become the best of friends, right? And at this time too, the hand to Hubert, his little companion there that's supposed to be helping him out, he's just getting absolutely drunk the whole time, sneaking sips of the wine, and that's a little funny comedic scene there. And then Prince Philip arrives, and Hubert tells him to get ready, but Prince Philip says that he's already met his bride. And Hubert, obviously there's some confusion here. He's like, "Oh, you met Aurora?" And he's like, no, I met this other girl, once upon a dream, right? He says once upon a dream, just like Aurora says about Prince Philip in the scene previous. And then he tells Hubert, this is quite a funny joke, I like it. He says, "You're living in the past, father. This is the 14th century," which is quite funny. And then Prince Philip leaves to go find Briar Rose, and Hubert is just astounded. He's just confuddled now. He's like, how the hell do I tell King Stefan that my son is running away now and he's not going to marry his daughter, right? That's quite a predicament for him. So then we cut to the 8th scene here. So then we cut back to the 3 fairies leading Briar Rose / Aurora, because she knows she's a princess now, back to the castle. And they sneak her in and they give her a crown in kind of her bedroom here. Again, symbolizing, we're giving you everything, right? You have the keys to the kingdom, basically. We're telling you you're a princess. You're the heir to the royal family. Like, what more could you want? Like, if you were to be dropped information on you out of the blue, being told that you're the king's daughter is like probably the best information you could possibly get, especially in the 14th century here. But Briar Rose, or Aurora I should call her now, is just absolutely distraught. Like, she starts crying, she starts bawling her eyes out, and the fairies are like, okay, let's just leave her alone for a bit. Let's let her have some time to herself, because she's obviously distraught about this guy who she met in the forest for 5 minutes. So let's leave her alone. And then this is exactly when Maleficent appears in the fireplace with this green ball. And this is such a creepy shot. Such a great shot. But I think what this represents, and I don't want to get too dark here because I'm talking about children's movie. But I really do think that this represents kind of depression and, you know, those kind of ending your life thoughts incurring or approaching on Aurora, right? They're kind of seeping into her head now. She's kind of starting to think those bad life-ending thoughts, and I think that's what's happening here, because she's distraught about the guy who she just met, and she's going up now. She's going up into the attic, and she's gonna go touch the spindle and enter basically a sleep that's gonna last forever until obviously she's rescued. But she doesn't know that at the time. She's gonna go touch the spindle and basically doze off into the unconscious forever, which I think is representing her kind of wanting to end her life at this point. And it is accurate. You know, women on average usually take their lives with sleeping pills, right? They want to sleep. They just want to not exist anymore and kind of fall away and not be remembered. Whereas men usually end their lives, unfortunately, with firearms, right? It's more of a destructive thing. It's going up in a big ball of flames. It's self-destruction. So it's two different ways of conceptualizing, you know, ending your life. And in this scene, we see the feminine version of that quite clearly. And it's a dark scene. I mean, she's going up into this dark room where she's, you know, she touches the spindle and then she's dead, you know, in a sleep that she can wake up from, but for all purposes, she's dead now. And the fairies, they're too late. You know, by the time they open up the room, they see her walking through the fireplace, and then they're searching around the castle, and then by the time they get to the room that she's in, she's already touched the spindle and she's already gone. And yeah, this is kind of the darkest scene of the film, but Maleficent shows up. She calls the fairies fools, and then we move on to the next scene. So we cut back to the king and queen, and Hubert is trying to tell Stefan that Prince Philip isn't coming. He's trying to get the words out, but he can't really tell him. He keeps getting interrupted. And then we cut to the fairies, who are crying over Aurora. They're obviously very distraught that they failed. And then Flora says, we're going to put the whole kingdom to sleep until Rose awakens. So basically, this is, you know, some divine intervention here. They're putting the whole thing on pause until this story gets resolved. And they put Prince Hubert to sleep just as he's trying to explain to Stefan that Philip isn't coming, and that he's fallen in love with a peasant girl once upon a dream. and then Flora gets an idea, and they start hurrying back to the cottage to go find Prince Philip. Right? They kind of get word from Hubert that Prince Philip is looking for Aurora. As Hubert's falling asleep, so then they rush back to the cottage, knowing that their only chance to save Aurora is to find Prince Philip and to get him to rescue her. So then we cut to Prince Philip arriving at the cottage, and he goes inside, but Maleficent is there with all of her minions, and they tie him up. He puts up a good fight, you know, he's battling those minions as tough as he can, but there's just too many for him, and he's overcome, and they take Prince Philip away. And then just after that, the fairies arrive just to see that the place is absolutely thrashed and that Prince Philip has been taken. So then they travel to the Forbidden Mountain. So then we get to the Forbidden Mountain scene, and this is one of the three big scenes in the movie. Terrific scene, right? So the fairies are sneaking into this castle at the top of Forbidden Mountain, and Forbidden Mountain, obviously, it looks like hell, right? It looks a little similar to where Scar was having that Be Prepared sequence, and just like in that Be Prepared sequence, you have all the minions dancing around green smoke or green flame, right? These, not to be like Maleficent or Scar, but these dumb, idiot, imbecile minions who are just kind of insanely dancing around and worshiping evil itself, signified here with the green flame. And then Maleficent goes down and she kind of tortures Prince Philip, not physically, but mentally. She kind of taunts him. She tells him that she's going to keep him locked up here for 100 years. And maybe at the end of the 100 years, she'll let him free so he can go rescue his princess, and they'll be old and just about dead. So she's really rubbing it in here. But just as she leaves, the fairies come and they use their wands to break Prince Philip free. And they give him 2 gifts. So they give Aurora 3 gifts, and they give Prince Philip 2 gifts. I don't really know if there's anything to read into that, but there is something to read into the gifts that they give Prince Philip. They're quite important. So they give him the Shield of Virtue. So the Shield of Virtue is, you know, that's your morality. That's the morals that you develop in life. That's going to be your shield. When bad things happen, when you have to make moral judgments, you're going to have to fall back on that. right? You're going to have to fall back on, maybe for some of you it's religion, maybe some of you more secular atheist types have made your own conclusions for morality, but that's what you're going to have to lean on when you're getting attacked in the world, right? When things are coming at you, when you're approached by the chaos and the unconscious of the world, you need to protect yourself with your virtue, with your morals. And the second gift that they give him is the sword of truth. Now that's what you cut through the unconscious, what you cut through the chaos, what you cut through evil with, right? You cut through all of that stuff with truth. That's how you blaze your path in the world. You cut through the thorns, which we'll see explicitly in a few seconds here. You cut through those thorns with truth. Truth is your weapon in this world. And that's a key lesson people need to know, right? You have your shield, which is your morals and your virtue, and you have your sword, which is your truth. And that's really how you should think about the world. And they say these weapons of righteousness will triumph over evil, which is exactly what happens in reality. And then the crow witnesses the escape, and he alerts all the goblins. And then the prince starts, fighting the goblins as he's escaping. And this is where he gets his divine intervention, right? God comes down and helps him here. The fairies turn the rocks that are pushed onto Prince Philip into bubbles. They turn the arrows that are shot at Prince Philip into flowers. And they turn the hot oil, which is dumped onto Prince Philip, into a rainbow. So there's 3 instances there, right? 3 is a magical number. They use 3 different instances there of the divine or the spiritual coming down and directly helping Prince Philip in reality. So that's bang on. You can't count on that in your life. If you have, virtue and you have truth and you're fighting your battles honestly, you can not expect, but maybe, God will butt in and he'll give you a couple breaks. He'll help you out here or there. And I think that's just perfectly symbolized here. And then Merryweather chases down the crow and she turns him into a gargoyle, which is perfect, right? Because you have the evil crow, which is evil in this case, turned into a gargoyle. Now, what's a gargoyle? What is the significance of a gargoyle? Because you find them on churches, right? You find them on all sorts of buildings, but you find them on churches, which is, it's supposed to be a holy place. Why would you find some weird disfigured monster on a church? Well, it's the integration of the good and the evil, like I was talking about before, right? You have to have both sides. You have to recognize that there is evil in the world and there's evil within you. And that's the story that we're getting here. That's the moral of the entire story of Sleeping Beauty, is to not overprotect your child, because evil will find them. It'll find them within and without, right? Internally and externally. So that's perfect that she turns him into a gargoyle, because gargoyles are there to represent that for the church and to also ward off evil, right? They're kind of to scare away the real demons. At least that's what I've read. But there's some brilliant books on gargoyles out there you guys can go read. And then Maleficent curses the thorns around the castle, and they grow up to a giant size, blocking the path of the prince. So he has to cut down all these thorns that block his path with the sword of truth. And that's perfect, right? That's hearkening back to what I said before, right? The rose is being protected by the thorns, and he has to cut through the thorns to get to the rose. And that's, what you have to do in a relationship, right? You have to cut down some thorns to get to know the person and to become one with them, right? To really connect with them, you have to break down some barriers. Those barriers are the thorns. So the thorns, they represent a bunch of different things, but that's a couple of them. And then once he gets through the thorns, he's blocked by Maleficent, who says, "Now you will deal with me and all the powers of hell." So she says it explicitly here. I don't even have to read into the hell symbolism. She says it explicitly that she's come from hell. So she turns herself into a dragon, which is perfect, right? This is what I was saying in the Lion King analysis, where at the end of Disney films, the villain will sometimes, not every time, but he'll turn himself into like the full villain, the full monster. They'll become their fully actualized evil. That's Scar when he's jumping through the flames, right? And you see him with his evil face, and it's like, that's Scar at his worst. You'll see it, I think, with Ursula, too, in The Little Mermaid. And there's a bunch of Disney films that do this, but perfectly represented here, right? Maleficent, who's kind of, she's not an ugly witch. She's decent looking, she's a woman, and then she turns into a dragon. So now Prince Philip has to fight his dragon, which harkens back to St. George and the dragon, which, if you guys have not noticed yet, the logo for this channel is a painting of St. George fighting a dragon. So that's a very, very, very old story, right? This goes way, way back. There's many, many paintings of it. There's so many beautiful ones. That's just my favorite. But fighting the dragon, the man fighting the dragon to get to the princess, it's a very, very common motif. It basically, not fully, but it encapsulates the hero's journey very, very well. And a couple words on dragons here while I'm at it. So we see the dragon, and it has green eyes with green smoke coming out of its mouth, right? And that harkens back to what I was saying in The Lion King about green being the color for evil. Now, sometimes red's evil and blue's good, but then sometimes that's reversed. Sometimes blue's evil and red's good. So they're not perfect colors to use for good and evil. The best color to use to represent evil is green, because it's obviously the color of envy and jealousy, and there's so many things that go into the color of green that I don't want to explain too much today. But you have that, obviously. But the dragon, what does the dragon represent? Why dragons? What are dragons? Have you ever thought about what are dragons? Why are there dragon myths everywhere in the world? Why does China have dragon myths, and India has dragon myths, and Scandinavia has dragon myths? Why does this pop up everywhere? Right? You might draw the conclusion that dragons were actually real at some point. That's not true. They represent three different things. So you'll notice with dragons, they'll often have the mouth or the head of an alligator or a snake. So that's a dangerous reptile, right? It's a predatory reptile. And they'll often have scales across their whole body too, right? Also representing the predatory reptile. But they also have a body that's usually, sometimes it's two-legged, but it's usually four-legged, and they have claws. So they're kind of built like a cat. So there's a predatory cat there too. But they also have wings, so they're also a predatory bird. Now, what are the three animals that preyed on us when we were, evolving into human beings? It was big cats, big reptiles, and big birds. That's what preyed on us. So the monster, right? The dragon, is a representation of all those things that preyed on us. It's all the evil, all the chaos, all the shadow in the world, right? The things that are preying on you in the night. So the prince has to confront all of that. That's what we all have to do, right? Not all of us are going to have to fight off big birds or snakes or lions anymore because we're so advanced, but it's a symbolism for what we have to face in our lives, right? We have to confront things that are in the shadows, that we haven't shone light on yet, that things that scare us. We have to confront those things in life, and that's symbolized here in the dragon. So he battles the dragon, and the land is completely engulfed in green fire. Again, going back to the be prepared scene, right? All the green smoke everywhere. They battle to the edge of a cliff, just like in The Lion King. They battle to the edge of a cliff, and it actually looks very, very similar to The Lion King, right? This shot here is, you could almost take this out of a Lion King if you had Scar and Simba on this cliff, right? And that represents something too, right? The hero is pushed to the brink. He's either going to fall into a pit of fire, literally fall into hell, or he's going to face his dragon. He's going to face reality. He's going to face his shadow, internally and externally, right? It symbolizes both. So he's either going to fight the beast or fall into fire, into flames. And that's exactly what that means here. So he's on the very edge of it. The fire's mounting, and the dragon's about to push him off, and his shield flies away too, right? So he loses his morals, he loses his virtue. Right, that's gone. Sometimes that happens in life. Sometimes you do sin and you lose your virtue, or things come up that question your morality, and you're like, I don't really know what to make of that. So what do you have left? You have the sword of truth. You have truth. And he throws the sword of truth at the dragon. The dragon falls off of the cliff. The dragon burns away. And what's left? The sword of truth. That's what's left, right? So truth remains. And then the lands return to normal. And that's what happens in all these hero stories, right? At the end of Lord of the Rings, what happens when Sauron's tower falls and the ring falls into Mount Doom? What happens, right? The shadow goes away and all the light comes, right? That's exactly what happens. So then we get into the last scene. So now we get into the final scene of the film, the true love's kiss, right? The prince has faced his dragon, he's battled his unconscious, and this also, some people misread this. Some people think that Sleeping Beauty is misogynistic because the prince has to save Aurora. That's not exactly what's happening here. Sure, that's what's happening externally, But that's what happens in most of human history. I mean, if we're being honest here, men usually save women physically. That's just usually what happens. Most firefighters are men, most police officers are men, right? I can go down the list. Usually, men save women physically. Now, that's not to say that women don't save men. They do. They just do it in a different way. They save them spiritually. And we're going to see that towards the end here with the true love's kiss, and then Prince Philip finally becomes one, but also Aurora becomes one. But Prince Philip fighting the dragon isn't just an external battle. It's also an internal battle for Princess Aurora, I should say. This is her consciousness fighting the unconscious, right? So she's in the sleep right now, right? She's in the unconscious. She met the prince. She got distraught, and then she touched the spindle. You know, she was tempted by Maleficent. She was tempted by evil. She touches the spindle. She goes into unconsciousness. But then within unconsciousness, the prince, her consciousness, which, you know, the prince symbolizes her consciousness fighting the unconscious, which is the dragon, and then she becomes awake, right? That's what happens. When you integrate yourself, when you integrate the animus with the anima, when you integrate your shadow, when you confront your shadow and integrate it, that's when you become awake. That's when you become a fully actualized individual. So this story follows both, right? It follows both the prince and the princess, and she has to face her consciousness. He has to face the unconsciousness, right? He has to face chaos. She has to face order. You know, you can think about it in a couple different ways. And then they have to integrate the lessons, and then they dovetail together. And you see, I just made a heart there, right? Because it's a perfect story. You see both sides. You see the feminine and the male, and it just comes together perfectly. I love it. Another thing I should say is you can't just face the evil in the world, right? You can't just go out there and face the evil. You have to learn something, and you have to integrate something from that lesson, right? You'll see this perfectly in video games, right? If any of you out there play video games, I'm sure you've seen this many, many times, right? On level 1, you have to learn something. You have to figure out, you know, a double jump and attack, and that's how you beat the boss for level 1, right? So you learn that lesson in beating the boss, in facing the evil. So you face the evil, you learn a lesson, and then that lesson will help you beat the second level. But obviously in the second level, that won't do. You'll have to learn something else as well. And then in level 3, you have to learn a third lesson through fighting the evil, through confronting the unconscious, the chaos, right? You go and you confront that, and you learn another lesson, then you integrate that, and then you go on to the next level, right? This is what you do in life, right? You face something challenging, something that's, you know, confronting you. You know, it could be pure evil, or it could just be something unknown. But you confront that, and then you learn something, you integrate it, and then that's when you fully have conquered it. If you face a challenge and you learn nothing from it, you haven't conquered that challenge yet, right? It's like if you have any negative memories that are, I think, 6 months or older, if they're a year or older, if there's any memories that are a year or older that still bother you, it's because you haven't integrated the lesson yet. You haven't learned what you needed to learn. So you need to go back, face the unconscious again, face the unknown again, face the chaos again, and relearn the lesson. And that's all showcased here in Sleeping Beauty. It's a children's story, and it seems very simple on its surface, but there's so much baked into here. And then, you know, I should get into the scene itself and not ramble for too long, but the prince, you know, rushes to Aurora. He kisses her, the kiss symbolizing the unity, them becoming one, the love becoming true. You know, you can love somebody and love somebody and love somebody, but until you know, make it physical and kiss them, it's not going to become real. And then, of course, the whole kingdom awakes. King Hubert, he's still trying to tell Stefan that the prince won't come and marry Aurora, just when they're interrupted by the entrance of Aurora and Prince Philip descending from the stairs, right? So they're descending down. They're coming down from a higher place. That's cool, man. It's like they're coming down from heaven or something. They've become one, and in that unity, they've become something higher. They've become something more. And that's what you want from a real relationship, from a real spouse, right? You want to become one with them so that you're something more than just yourself. You're more than you're just your component parts, right? You're now that person as well. You become one thing. And it's beautiful, right? And then they dance together, also symbolizing the unity. And Merryweather and Flora change the color of the dress back and forth while the music plays. So obviously they're still changing the dress back and forth, but it's done in a musical way. It's done with rhythm, right? Kind of symbolizing the integration of the animus and the anima, both within Aurora and the prince. I believe what that's what the symbolism is. So yeah, that wraps up the whole film. That's all of Sleeping Beauty. I hope you guys found that entertaining or educational. If you guys did, please leave a like, leave a comment. Don't forget to subscribe. I really want to do these for you guys full time in the future. So let's get this channel up there. Thank you guys so much for watching. It means the world to me. I'll catch you guys in the next one, and peace.